Welcome back to the Gridiron Guesser in our Week 5 picks. We're excited to be here, and we have 7 great picks for you this week. So go ahead and subscribe. Just do it right now. No excuses. We survived Week 4 going 4-6-1 against the spread with several really bad beats. Clemson screwed us. Find a damn kicker. UCLA's offense was BYU came so close to the cover against Kansas, but gave up 2 defensive scores. And Notre Dame really f***ed us. Well, Ohio State really f***ed us, actually, by scoring with like 0.7 seconds left and allowing them time to kick that extra point. But still, total garbage. Anyway, on to Week 5, where we have 7 money picks guaranteed to put you in that winner's circle. So here you go. Game number 1. We have a Friday night Pac-12 thriller as Utah heads up to Corvallis to take on the Beavers. The Beavers are a 4.5-point favorite with a total set at 45. So Utah comes in having beaten UCLA last week 14-7 in one of the worst offensive games of the season. Sure, both defenses are pretty good, but Utah really should be able to score more than 14 points against UCLA. The Beavers come in off a road loss to Washington State, where they didn't look very good for most of the game before mounting a late comeback that fell short. The money numbers on this one show us that the Beavers are 9-2 against the spread over their last 11 games and 6-1 against the spread versus Pac-12 opponents over their last 7. Utah is 6-1 straight up versus Oregon State since 2014, but only 3-4 against the spread. So what's going to happen? Utah is going to have to score more than 14 points to beat the Beavers on the road. The Utes have not looked good on offense with a ton of injuries this season. With Cam Rising still out, although we've heard he could return at any time, Nate Johnson has gotten the last several starts and has been less than impressive. Utah has lived off its defense to this point of the season, and that's not all a bad thing as the Utes are terrific on that side of the ball. As for Oregon State, last week's loss was a little unexpected, but the Cougars are really good and will contend for that Pac-12 title. Oregon State will try to use their powerful rushing attack to take over the game and slow it down a bit, which should also help DJU be able to find some more targets down the field throwing the ball. Without Cam Rising and the Beavers circling the wagons after a bit of a tough loss last week, the Gridiron Guesser likes Oregon State to find a way to win this game in Corvallis by controlling the clock and limiting the number of possessions for the Utes. But Utah is too good defensively to let this game get too far away from them. So the Gridiron Guesser is taking Utah to cover, but the Beavers win 23-20 in a nice Friday night thriller. The Florida Gators head to Lexington to take on the Kentucky Wildcats in our Game 2 pick for Week 5. The Wildcats are a slim 1-point favorite with the total set at 45. Kentucky comes into this game at 4-0, and that's really about it. Nothing they have done to this point has been very impressive, but they've also done what they're supposed to do to 4 inferior opponents. The Gators come into this game off an underwhelming 22-7 win over Charlotte a week ago, a week after their dominating upset over the Tennessee Volunteers that surprised many of us. So which Gators team is going to show up this Saturday? The money numbers on this one are pretty extensive. The Gators are 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 games and are 0-5-1 against the spread in their last 6 matchups versus Kentucky. The Wildcats are 5-2 against the spread in their last 7 games, while the Gators are 4-1 against the spread in their last 5 SEC games. They are 1-8 straight up in their last 9 road games. Yikes. So what's going to happen? Kentucky has won the last 2 matchups against the Gators outright. The Gators looked bad in the opening week loss to Utah, bounced back the next 2 weeks looking pretty impressive, and then were looking very average again last week against Charlotte. Kentucky has been steadily above average in all 4 games this season. Nothing too good and nothing too bad. Kentucky has been very good running the ball this season, so expect Ray Davis to carry the load for the Wildcats. The Gators are strong against the run, so that will be a very critical matchup in this game. Devin Leary has not been that impressive so far this season at quarterback for Kentucky, and he'll need to avoid throwing interceptions to keep this game close. For Florida, quarterback Graham Mertz has been good, but not great, and has had a good ground game to lean on. The Kentucky defense has been very good against the run, so expect Mertz to be called on to make a few more throws. This game will be about the defenses. Both offenses will struggle to consistently move the ball for much of the game. The difference in this game will be a big turnover. The Gridiron Guesser likes the Wildcats to force Graham Mertz into a couple of bad throws that lead to points for Kentucky. The Gridiron Guesser is taking the Wildcats to win this one and cover 21-17. In Game 3, we've got the Michigan Wolverines at the Nebraska Cornhuskers. The Wolverines come in as a 17-point road favorite with a total set at 39. This is our first time this season to pick a game involving Michigan, and that's because they played four ridiculously bad opponents. That 4-0 record might as well be 0-0 for us because it still really doesn't show us anything about them. As for Nebraska, they come in at 2-2 but lost their only meaningful games to Minnesota and Colorado. The Huskers have looked pretty much atrocious on offense, only being able to score 35 and 28 points in their two wins over the directional schools. On a quick side note, it's just awful to see this program like Nebraska be so down. We truly believe that Matt Rule is the guy to turn it around there, but it's going to take some time. They are just really, really down at this point. The money numbers here show us that Michigan hasn't covered the spread in their last 5 games, while Nebraska is 12-5 against the spread as an underdog in their last 17. Michigan has been dominant over the Big Ten West, though, going 7-1 against the spread over the last 8 games. And the total under has hit well for both Michigan and Nebraska recently. So what's going to happen? There's no suspense here. Michigan is going to win this game. But are they going to cover? Nebraska is not going to score more than a couple of touchdowns against the number 1 scoring defense in the country. But can the Husker defense slow down Michigan enough to cover that 17 points? The Nebraska defense is fantastic at stopping the run, allowing less than 50 yards per game. But J.J. McCarthy will be able to expose the Cornhusker D through the air and hit big plays in the passing game. If Nebraska can force the Wolverines into a turnover or two, the Huskers have a chance to hang around. But we don't think that's going to happen. Look for this game to be close much of the first half. But the Wolverines are just too strong on both sides of the ball and will eventually start eating up yards in bunches. The Gridiron Guesser likes the Wolverines to win and cover over the Huskers 35-13. Game 4 features a Big 12 matchup as the undefeated Kansas Jayhawks travel to Austin to take on Texas. The Longhorns are a 16.5-point favorite, and the total for this one is set at 61. Texas already has a huge win on the season by beating Alabama on the road, while the Jayhawks are still trying to prove themselves as a real Big 12 contender this season. Texas pounded Baylor last week 38-6, and their defense was very impressive. Not to be outdone, the Jayhawks got 2 defensive scores last week in their win over BYU. KU quarterback Jalen Daniels was a preseason pick for Conference Player of the Year by many, and so far has looked impressive this season. Can the Jayhawks do enough on the road here to pull the upset? The money numbers here show us that Kansas is 5-1 against the spread versus Texas over their last 6 matchups, but only 2-6 against the spread in their last 8 games. The Longhorns are 4-1 against the spread versus Big 12 opponents in their last 5, but only 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 games at home. So what's going to happen? The Jayhawks come in averaging nearly 38 points per game, while the Longhorn defense has only given up 56 points all season. Kansas has been balanced so far on offense, averaging over 200 yards passing and rushing per contest, but that's not been against defenses like the Longhorns. Texas's defense has been good, really good. So expect KU to have trouble consistently moving the ball and putting points on the board. Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers has yet to throw an interception this season, and we expect him to have a big day against the Kansas Jayhawks secondary. Both teams will be able to slow down the run a bit, but the difference in this game will be Quinn Ewers' ability to throw and make big plays down the field. Kansas is too good offensively to be totally shut down, but they won't be able to keep up for 4 quarters. The Gridiron Guesser likes the Longhorns in this one to win, but that 16.5-point spread is just too big for an offense such as Kansas here. We're going with the Longhorns to win this one, but they're not going to cover. Texas wins in a good one, 41-28. For Game 5, we have the LSU Tigers at the Ole Miss Rebels. LSU comes in as a 2.5-point favorite with the total set at 66. LSU is coming off its win last Saturday night over Arkansas 34-31, while Ole Miss comes in having been beat down by Alabama in a disappointing 24-10 loss to the Tide. So how will the Rebels be mentally for this rivalry with the Tigers? Lane Kiffin and the Rebels seem to put so much energy and effort into the Alabama game every year. If they can't match that same energy and effort this week, LSU is capable of beating them down just like last season's 45-20 drubbing in Baton Rouge. Let's look at the money numbers here for this one. The one here that quickly sticks out is that the visiting team in this series is 1-9 against the spread over the last 10 matchups. Wow! However, Ole Miss is 2-5 against the spread versus LSU over their last 7. Also, keep in mind that the total over seems to hit often for these teams as well. So what's going to happen? First off, is Jackson Dart and the Ole Miss offense really even that good? We've been able to watch a lot of video of the Rebels this season, and we just don't see it yet. Jackson Dart and Junkins just don't look that good right now. They weren't impressive against Tulane or Georgia until late in the game, and they really did about what we thought they would do against Alabama, and that was sputter. Yes, although we did think they would do just enough to cover, damn it. On the other side of the ball, LSU and Jaden Daniels appear to have found their rhythm. After a slow start against Arkansas, the Tigers were unstoppable for the last 32 minutes of that game, scoring at will. Malik Neighbors is a terrific wideout with big play potential every time he catches the ball. Now, the LSU defense does leave something to be desired. KJ Jefferson for Arkansas was able to throw in the Tigers' secondary and hit several big plays. And the Razorbacks were also able to run the ball better than anticipated on what has been a strong LSU front. So can the Rebels take advantage of any of these possible weaknesses? Well, the Gridiron Guesser is going to step out on a very, very small little limb here and say, yes, they can. Much like Arkansas did, we think Ole Miss will be able to move the ball on LSU's defense. The Tigers' defense has some holes in it that Lane Kiffin will be able to expose. The Rebels will need Junkins and the running game to get going to help Dart find some openings in the secondary. Defensively, the Rebels have been very good at getting pressure on the quarterback, ranking 11th in the country in sacks and limiting big plays, which is how LSU was able to come back from a 13-3 first-half deficit against Arkansas last week. This is going to be a fairly high-scoring game with both teams trading blows all evening. In the end, the Gridiron Guesser likes the Rebels to play an inspired game with their backs against the wall and make one or two more plays than the Tigers to get the outright win and cover over LSU. The Gridiron Guesser says Ole Miss wins 37-34. In our 6th pick of Week 5, Notre Dame will travel to Duke to take on the undefeated Blue Devils. The Irish come in as a 5.5-point favorite with a total set at 53. So, will Notre Dame be recovered and ready to play Duke after such a physical game and disappointing loss to Ohio State last Saturday? Let us say this right now. Duke is not some feel-good story team this season. Duke is really good. Very, very good. And if Notre Dame comes in not ready to play, Duke will blow their f***ing doors off. The money numbers here show us that Irish and the Blue Devils have split the last 4 games going 2-2 against the spread. For the Irish, the visiting team has covered the last 3 matchups, and both teams have hit the over this season consistently when looking at the totals. So what's going to happen? Duke is going to come out with their hair on fire. Riley Leonard will be able to use his legs and arm to get the Irish defense on their heels early, and the Duke defense will be able to slow down Sam Hartman and that Irish offense for a while. Then Notre Dame will wake up. The Irish will be able to move the ball more and more as the game goes on, and the Irish defense will settle in and stiffen up once they become more accustomed to Leonard running and throwing. Even though some offensive fireworks may kick off this battle, expect it to be a tight, heavyweight fight that lasts well into the 4th quarter. The Gridiron Guesser likes the Irish to find a way to get the win on the road at the end, but Duke is too good not to cover that 5.5-point spread. Give us the Irish in a close one, 27-24 over the Blue Devils. Our 7th and final pick here in Week 5 is the South Carolina Gamecocks heading over to Knoxville to take on the Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee is a 12-point favorite with a total set at 62.5. Is Tennessee really good enough to be a 12-point favorite over any SEC opponent that's not Vanderbilt, especially one that put up 63 points on them last season? Is South Carolina really any good at all? Or did they just fool everyone with that first half against a sleepwalking Georgia team? The Gamecocks looked good offensively last week in their win over Mississippi State, as Spencer Rattler continued his great season going 18 for 20, 288 yards, and 3 touchdowns. The defense, on the other hand, not so good, giving up over 500 yards of offense to the Bulldogs. Tennessee got back on track last week, hammering UTSA, and Joe Milton played pretty good. The Vols' running game was fantastic, and their defense did what it should have done against a lesser opponent. The money numbers here show us that the Gamecocks are 3-1 against the spread this season, while Tennessee is only 2-2. The Gamecocks did win last season 63-38 in a weird, unexpected game in which Hendon Hooker went down. But the Gamecocks are just 3-18 all-time in Knoxville. So what's going to happen? Shane Beamer just has a way of hanging around in these types of games. Tennessee no doubt wants payback for last year's blowout loss. But are this year's Vols good enough to return the favor? Hell, are this year's Vols good enough to win this game at all? In their only meaningful game so far this season, the Vols look downright pathetic against the Gators in the Swamp, scoring just 16 points. For the Gamecocks, Spencer Rattler has been much better this season and has clearly been the leader on the field for this team. If it were just a battle of quarterbacks, we'd take Spencer Rattler over Joe Milton every time. But it's not just about the quarterbacks, and the South Carolina defense has had problems this year, particularly against the pass. The Vols have a good running attack with Jalen Wright and Jabari Small, and that should help Milton be able to find some soft spots downfield to make some big plays in the passing game. Both teams are going to score points in this one. The Gridiron Guesser is going to take Tennessee to win this one in a high-scoring affair, but Tennessee is just not good enough yet to cover that 12-point spread against a quality opponent like South Carolina. The Gridiron Guesser is going to take the Vols to win 38-30, but the Gamecocks are going to get the cover. So there you have it, the 7 picks for the 7 biggest games of Week 5. Get ready to go undefeated on these picks. If you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe to our channel and turn on those notifications. Thanks again for watching. Enjoy the games this week, and we'll see you next week for more money picks on the Gridiron Guesser.